let's call the P&E committee to order and the clerk will call the roll. Okay, and as a courtesy to the other members, we'll wait till 2:25 for those that are still arriving. And we can be at ease for now.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Hobie. 15 minutes since adjournment, so we can start. First order of business, I had promised Senator Ruff last week that we would strike SB 556.
We need to take a roll.
We took the roll, so I need a motion. I guess it's a recorded vote to strike SB 556.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of striking SB 556 at the patron's request will vote aye. Okay.
Ayes
Now,
13-0.
Well, is Senator Bell here? I think you're the only patron in the room, so why don't we start with SB 463, and I understand that you have a new substitute, so we would need a motion to reconsider the vote by which we adopted the previous substitute on SB 463. Is there a second? Okay, all in favor of reconsidering the last substitute will vote aye on the board. Or is that a voice vote? Well, we had previously adopted it. We have to reconsider that vote. Is that a voice? Can we just adopt a new sub, even though there was a previous sub that was adopted? Either way, I mean, however you want to do it. Okay. I stand corrected parliamentarily. Senator Bell has a new sub for 463 that's at your seat. Is there a motion to?
Is it our seat?
Yeah, it's paper clipped behind your agenda. It says clerk's copy 463. Is there a motion to adopt that substitute?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of adopting SB 463 substitute will say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Senator Bell.
Mr. Chairman, just make sure that the one we discussed about tuition, was that just covered in what was just done?
It was. Okay. So I know we've talked about that each time. I will tell you straight up, this is a complicated piece of legislation. This is a hard thing to try to tackle. And we've tried to rein this in and not go for 100% solution. I think we do that, it will fail. The 100% solution, which Delegate Cherry tried in the House, has already failed. So I think we need to rein this back. And again, if we want to do more than that, frankly, I think that it's up to the will of committee. I'm not sure we'll get much farther than this. What I've tried to do is take the most egregious items. I'll remind you that Virginia is one of the only states that has no personal campaign finance laws, and I think any advance we make on this is a big advance forward. So I've tried to focus on the most egregious things, things that we talked about before that were issues. First off, using the FEC guidance as a starting point. The bill does direct the Board of Elections and Attorney General direct guidance on this. They can certainly look at that, and some of the things on the FEC site we already have included in here. Some of them we haven't, but they will have to develop some regulations on that and guidance going forward. So we have really addressed that. A couple of things we've taken out that were difficult, and this starts up in lines 364 of the bill. We took out clothing purchases. There were issues if you had a campaign T-shirt, would that be a violation? And there's equity issues between female and male candidates. We took that out entirely, so clothing is no longer included in the bill. We also took out food items. Food items is an issue. If you have a piece of pizza at the campaign office, is that considered household? So we took that off entirely as well. The other change we made, and I thank Senator Eben for his work with me on this, is tuition payment. We amended it so we could include tuition payment if it was for a campaign candidate course, someone in the campaign, and or a course to help a legislator perform their duties better. So we added those in. With that being said, again, I will tell you, this is not the 100% solution, but it does take out, I believe, the most egregious things, and it's a starting point. The last thing I'm going to say is everybody's got their own experience as a legislator and a public servant. My experience, I think people who serve here are honest people, good people who come to serve. We might have different worldviews, but come to do the right thing. And frankly, the biggest abusers I've seen personally of campaign funds are not people I've seen here in Richmond. Sometimes it's the candidates who seek public office and lose. And then they're able to do broad things with that money. So I would think with this bill, at least as a starting point, we can do something to prevent that. That being said, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Are there members of the panel with questions for Senator Bell?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Deeds.
So the clothing-related expenses otherwise would have been in this list contained on lines 357 through 363, and since it's not there, it's not anywhere else in the bill.
That is my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah, I see council shaking his head, so that's correct.
And Senator Sproul.
Thank you. Every year, I have a pancake breakfast for the whole city. It's paid for by campaign funds. It's for the whole city. But could I do that?
Mr. Chair, assuming that Mr. Sproul's pancakes taste wonderful and there's lots of butter and syrup, then I would assume it would be perfectly legal.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are any other questions from members of the panel, we've had extensive public testimony on.
Chairman?
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chairman,
Senator, we've got two questions. First, we'll go with down at this end. Senator.
I just want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly, but I think I heard Senator Bell focus on lines 357 through 361, but isn't really the defining language on 354 and 355 where it says it shall be considered converted if it's an expense, a person would exist irrespective of holding the office. So if you were wearing a shirt or any other article of clothing, which I assume you would do irrespective of holding an office, isn't that considered converted? Or if you're eating that pancake or syrup or butter, you're going to be eating irrespective of holding the office. So how is that not caught in that definition in 352 to 356?
Mr. Chairman, what I would say is that this would talk about personal use that's not related to the campaign or the candidate's duty in that office. I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, that is the wording we were shooting for, and we work with council to do. And I'm happy to amend if need be, but that's what we're shooting for. And if it's related to the campaign, it would not be considered a violation.
And before I turn to Senator Serval, I just want to say that it would be my understanding that if you had a shirt that said Bell for Senate, that a civilian, that would not be something you would have incurred as a civilian, or if you had pancakes at an event for donors or for people in the community, that's not something that you would normally be doing if you were not a candidate, I would assume.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with you. And the other thing is not to catch people in these, but the way the bill reads, if first off, the only people who could accuse you, frankly, of a violation would be a constituent or a donor. And if they do, there's an investigative process to see if it was legit. I would say something like that would be deemed as not legitimate. But if it were, at any point before the investigation is completed, the candidate could simply give the item back or pay the value of the item, and the investigation then goes away.
Okay, Senator Serval.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I probably spent 8 hours of my life, maybe 10, 12 hours of my life in meetings talking about this over the last 12 months. And we beat these dead horses to death to try to arrive at a solution that would work, that's been tested, that has gone through all the what-ifs, and we came up with it. The committee chose to ignore all that and take out the enactment clause, which ties this to federal law. And I would submit that if you want to know the answers to these questions, go on Google FEC guidance personal use, and type in T-shirt, and you can get the answer in about 20 seconds. If you want to find out the answer on food, you type it in, you get the answer in 20 seconds. But by deconforming from federal law, all we're doing is creating a minefield.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
And I'm sorry I wasn't here for the discussion last time, but I'm telling you, the actions that we took at the last meeting are just creating more problems than they're solving. We spent, I really wish we'd had, Senator Norman was there this summer and worked on all this stuff with us. He didn't express any objection to the approach we took in the meeting over the summer. And I'm not clear why all of a sudden there's problems with this. I know the House didn't have anybody there, and for some reason, the House chose not to put any Republican delegates on the study group. I don't know why, but I think the feds have figured this out, and we're just creating more problems going this route. So I'm not happy with where this is coming out, and I think we're creating problems. I'll just say that.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just respond to that. I hear where you're coming from, and I respect your knowledge and your investment in this area. I think, again, we have to make a decision. Do we come up with perfect, or we do something that advances the cause? I think this bill advances the cause. And I will say, while we did take out the references in the enactment clause of the FEC, I'm looking at the site right now. Most of the things there are in line with what we're doing. And as the regulations are developed, which is specified in the regulations, certainly as they're developed, they could use that as a source. Nobody's saying they can't. So it doesn't mean that those things are being thrown out entirely.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Senator Vogel.
is there anybody else in your queue, or can I go?
No, you're next.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Chair, I just want to say to Senator Bell, I have great respect and, in many ways, great sympathy for the patron of this bill, anybody who patrons this bill. I have been the patron of this bill at least 2 previous years, maybe more. It wasn't this exact bill, but it was a slightly more simple, a little more structured framework, perhaps. And here's my concern about where we are. I think I knew a lot about the previous one. I know some about this one. I think I understand it. When you consider that any person who believes that a violation has occurred, unless this is tight, where everybody will find themselves is often where people find themselves as a recipient of an FEC complaint right before an election. It doesn't matter what the allegation is. They can say, I'm a person and I believe, and therefore I've initiated this. And they have a framework on which to base that. And unless it's really tight, and I do have some concern about the language that Senator McDougall points to, that someone could make those allegations, and it doesn't matter if a body finds it to be credible or not credible. It's the fact that you had language to support allegations, and we all have been there. We all know what that's like. And so I just want to make certain that we're very mindful before we move ahead, that we don't create an ethics environment that is more likely to be abused than not. And I have to echo some of the sentiments of Senator Serval on that point. And so I would say I've always been a proponent of not permitting personal use. But I just worry a little bit about this language. And so if we can work on it further, great. If not, I do have some concerns. I just wanted to raise that for the committee.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chair.
Just
Senator Bell.
quick thing I'll say, I appreciate the battle scars, wounds you have from carrying this previously. It's a difficult subject. To your point, I think that's a great point, and try to address it 2 ways. First, the complaints have to come from a constituent of the office being held, so that limits it greatly, or someone who's contributed to that candidate, who then believes the funds are not being used correctly. So it just couldn't come, hopefully, as a political attack. There are also provisions in the bill, starting on line 478 on item F, where it discusses frivolous complaints if they are made and found to be without basis. Again, this is a difficult subject here, and I think that frankly, there's many ways of trying to go, but we did try to address it in there. I will tell you that Texas, believe it or not, tried to tackle this, and the only way they could get it passed was if they put an enactment clause, and it didn't apply to anybody during their entire term of service in the General Assembly there, which that doesn't really provide much for campaign, finance abuse. It doesn't really address it, since many of these people could be serving for decades. So I will tell you that this is littered with minefields. Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Well, we've heard extensive testimony on the last version of the bill, so I would just say if there's a member of the public who feels compelled to talk about what's changed with the substitute, we would take their comments now.
If you're in the Zoom room and wish to speak in regards to this bill, please raise your hand electronically now.
Mr. Chairman, there is a lady
We
who
have someone in the room. Okay. Why don't we have the person in the room come forward first, please? Ma'am.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It's so good to see you all in person instead of on a Zoom screen. My name is Mary Crutchfield. I'm with the League of Women Voters of Virginia. And the League of Voters of Virginia supports SB 463. This bill addresses the League's long-held belief that the personal use of campaign contributions should not be allowed. This change would modernize Virginia's laws to reflect similar personal use rules enacted in 2021 in many other states, such as Arkansas, Montana, and West Virginia, as described in a recent National Conference of State Legislatures report. And And we are particularly pleased that the unique nature of dependent care expenses is addressed in this bill and is included in the definition of campaign expenditure, as was recently accomplished in West Virginia and Vermont. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Were there any others? I think Nancy Morgan, you spoke last week. If you have more to tell us that's new and different, please speak up at this point.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I spoke about another bill, but I just want to say I completely sympathize with Senator Serval. This bill has been pending for years. It died 1,000 cuts in the Senate last year, and it was finally redrafted in last year's, and I'll remind you, taxpayer-funded bicameral bipartisan joint subcommittee to address the concerns raised in the Senate. And we think it's a diversionary tactic to talk about pancakes and consumption. Unfortunately, I think moving away from federal standards is a mistake, but at least we need to move ahead. And it does address, as Senator Bell addresses, frivolous complaints, which is a serious issue, and it moves Virginia forward in terms of good governance. So I really feel that not passing this would be a serious violation of the public's trust in this institution. Thank you.
Okay. If I could, were there any other speakers on virtually or otherwise?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. If I could ask counsel, where was the frivolous complaint language?
Line 478, Mr. Chairman.
478 of the substitute.
Mr. Chairman, I'll add that on line 406 to 411 of the substitute. There's also language that states that when a complaint is made, that complaint isn't made public until there is a finding that it is by both the Department of Elections and the State Board that it's a legitimate complaint and it goes to a public hearing. And at that point, it's made public, but before that, it's not. So that was another way that we tried to address the frivolous complaint.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Trump,
Yes, Senator Spruill.
the question is that during election times, if a citizen ever complained during election time, and the press love to eat us up, during election time, if a complaint made by a citizen, whether it's true or not, during election, a heated discussion, 2 months before election time, if they get out, that big news, and by the time the electorate, the board, all make all up on what have you, election be on top of it and say, hey, there's nothing to it, but it's too late. That's what I'm scared of, is that someone can just say something, and it could be true, could not be true. But once all this investigation starts, and the press have their field day, you're done. And when they find out about it, they say, oops, he's right. But you're on TV now. Mrs. Chairman, a short story for you is that when I was in the House, I was vice chair of the caucus. My job was for everybody who would pay the dues. We had 12 lobbyists with everybody to Ruth Chris. And it's body money up to make sure it was under the cap. I was in the paper in Chesapeake and had money raining down on my head, $300,000 on my head, that I carried all the caucus to Ruth Chris. My job was the vice chair, pay your dues. We got enough lobbyists to make sure the man was under the cap. Also said, Mr. Chairman, that I stayed in a 5-star hotel in Richmond. I don't think we have one. I stayed at London Road. At the time it was $69 and still stay there. But everybody got on me about it. But by the time they found out the truth, it was too late. It just to have my family know that I'm a poor man trying to make a living, so I overcome it. So that's my question, that when someone make that complaint to you, by the time the truth is found out about it, is it too late for you to recap your election?
Senator Bell, did you want to respond?
I would just say that, to my friend, the scenario he pointed out would be a gift to an elected official versus fall into this as a use of campaign expenditure. So I think it's two different things. To your point, though, about being judged in the court of public opinion before an investigation is complete, I can't disagree with you. I mean, but if someone, even without these regulations, if somebody says that they think you used campaign funds improperly and they're able to get enough media attention, it could already cause you harm today, even without this bill. But I think this bill would definitely put into line things that would be definitive. You can't use it. And again, I think we all can and probably look at situations, and I know I can, of people who ran for office, lost, and then did not properly dispose of campaign funds. And I think that's very egregious. So this does at least advance the cause.
Counsel, did you have something to add?
And Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this addresses the senator's issue, but we did talk about this during the joint subcommittee meeting and on lines 415 to 416. If there is a public hearing and it is proximate to an election within 30 days, the respondent does have the ability to postpone that hearing until after the election. So anyone springing anything on you in the last 30 days of the election, there is that protection, just so everybody knows.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Deeds.
This is an issue we've talked about for years. We're never going to get to a perfect place. We don't live in a perfect world, but this is a start. I move to report.
Okay, there's a motion to report, and Senator Howell seconds that motion. We'll vote on the board. Oh, I'm sorry, it's to report and refer to finance.
Ayes 8, no 7.
I thank the committee for your great amount of time on this bill.
Thank you, Senator Bell. Okay, so Senator Suderline has arrived and has two bills. Which bill would you like to take up first?
I've got the one that we were working on last week. I'm not sure if we're in a place for it. Senate Bill 67.
Okay, Senate Bill 67 about reporting certain large pre-election contributions. You have our attention.
Well, we discussed possibly amending it. I think there was some concerns on the committee last week. I don't know that it's in a place where folks have amendments for it. And so unless someone does, we could take that by for the year.
I move we carry the bill over for the year.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Okay, so we'll vote on carrying the bill by SB 67 for the year. All in favor will vote aye.
Ayes 15, no 0. What's that?
Okay. Now, Senator Suderline, we have the fundraising. Your next bill is SB 233 regarding campaign finance fundraising during special sessions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a pretty straightforward bill. We would have the same policy that we have for a regular session when we're in special session. During the special session, and when the House of Delegates was Zooming, and we were all in person together at the Science Museum, there was actually one of the delegates that Zoomed in and was participating in the House of Delegates from the clubhouse of his golf outing fundraiser.
Senator Deeds.
I understand the intent of the bill, and if we had another special session like we had last year, when part of the regular session was during a special session, I think it would make perfect sense to do something like this. But every year since about 2001, when we've had special sessions, they've gone all year. And if we can't raise money during that extended special session when we're not meeting here, we're never going to be able to raise money. You're talking about a constant turnover in the legislature.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would suggest that if we actually had the prohibition, like I think we ought to, we might also fix part of our special session problem.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Surville.
Mr. Chairman, I would just note, I don't think we have a special session problem in that we have a session and then we don't adjourn it and reclaim our power from the governor and hold it in our pocket to use whenever we feel like. And I think, by the way, that if you're trying to disincentivize that, you undermine the power of our branch, which to me I don't support.
Mr. Chair,
Okay,
Senator
Deeds.
I understand Senator Surville's point, but that was never the practice in this body until 2001. It's been the practice since. We've taken power from the governor's office through an extended special session. I agree. I don't think that should be the norm. But it certainly wasn't until 2001.
Okay, and Senator Suderline, so even if there's a special election in an election year for the Senate and the House that lasted into the fall or something, that you'd be prohibited from fundraising under this bill, right?
If there was a special session?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Peake.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and whoever may be able to answer this, it seems like 2 or 3 years ago, we just never adjourned. And so Senator Servell, if y'all remember, so we left, we didn't adjourn, and so we had the power to get a case continued under that. Lawyers did.
Mr. Chair, that was the case last year, too.
Was it last
That
year
was
too?
It's every year.
2012, 2011.
And so when we do that, but we're fundraising, when we leave here, we were able to fundraise even though we could still say we had never adjourned and could get a legal case continued, correct? For the lawyers?
That's a question for,
Absolutely.
For Senator Deeds and Senator Servell.
30-5 is a sword and a shield. And you can use it during a special session.
I'm a lawyer. I wouldn't know. I'm not a lawyer.
Mr.
I
Chairman.
was waiting for that.
okay, we've got Senator Servell next.
Thanks. And, Mr. Chairman, I would just note that it's not about 30-5. It's about making sure the governor doesn't usurp our power to elect people or confirm people to certain positions that's our prerogative. To me, that's part of it. That's a big part of it. And also, I don't think we should have to go groveling to the governor to go into a special session if we feel the need to go into special session, or to some extent get the consent of the other chamber if we don't want to. And that's one of the things that happens when you leave it open. But none of that has a lot to do with this, although I think this bill is in some way trying to disincentivize those things. And I would just rather have more options than less as a body. And it's been used by both sides. I mean, when I was in the first 10 years I served, I was in the minority, and I was probably subject to 6, 7, or 8 special sessions that didn't adjourn the entire year. So it's not a partisan thing at all. It's something the party in the majority does. So.
Okay, Senator Sudeline, do you have are there other questions for Senator Sudeline?
Mr. Chair, I was just to
Senator
say to
Deeds.
Senator Sudeline, if you wanted to restrict this to the days the General Assembly is actually in session during a special session, I would probably vote for it. But if you're saying during the whole special session, when we might be at home for months at a time, I'm not going to vote for it.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Sudeline.
I've enjoyed it's so great when you put a bill and you hear all the interesting discussion, which I have a lot of strong thoughts about that. But no, the point of this bill, is to not ever have folks fundraising on days that we're meeting. And I thought what happened during the special session, hopefully we never have another virtual session, but where someone was actually legislating from their fundraiser, that made me feel pretty bad about our situation. And that person is no longer in the General Assembly. But if you would like to amend it to say that on days that we're meeting, I would suggest that if it's going to be the day we're meeting, it shouldn't be the day, because when we had the special session, I remember, because it was pretty frustrating trying to do real estate, where we had it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we didn't know or at least I didn't know which days I was going to be in there other than the Monday. I would suggest that if we're going to make it narrower, which I'm happily to do that, we should say not on the day before the General Assembly is scheduled to meet during a special session. I just don't want us meeting. I don't want the fundraisers. I don't think we should have the fundraiser on Tuesday in between the Monday and Wednesday meeting either.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Senator
I think
Deeds.
what you're really after is to prevent legislators from using the special session as leverage to raise money.
Yes, sir.
That's what you're after.
Yes,
so
sir.
the timing really doesn't matter so much, whether it's the day before, day after. But I don't know how to get it perfect, but I think I know what you're trying to get at, and that was why Delegate Croshaw carried the bill in originally 1998, I think, to prevent fundraising during the session. When I first got here, we could raise money during the session. It was unseemly, but it happened. And I think Delegate Croshaw from our caucus, in maybe his last session, 99, I think 99 is when he did it, was carried legislation to prevent fundraising during the session.
So if someone would like to offer an amendment to narrow it to days when the General Assembly, the day the General Assembly is meeting or a day preceding a scheduled meeting of the actual chamber, I would think that would get us to where I'm hoping to go.
Special session when General Assembly's actually in session.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
First, we've got Senator Peake, and then I heard,
Not pro
and then after Senator Peake, Senator Boysko.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And before somebody makes that amendment, this is the problem. And nobody schedules their fundraiser in a day.
Yeah.
You schedule your fundraiser a month and a half out. And when we were in special session last year, we didn't know which days we were coming. We'd come on a Monday, and then we'd say, well, you're coming back on Thursday, and then you might come back on Thursday. We didn't know if we were going to be here Friday. Last year's special session, we had absolutely zero idea or warning which days we're going to be here. If you set up a fundraiser, we could have set up a fundraiser. We didn't know we were going to be in special session. So I just don't like the bill.
Okay, thank you, Senator Peake. Senator Boysko is next.
Well, let's look at the other side of the committee then. Thank you
Mr.
to my
Chairman.
seatmate over there.
Mr. Chairman, I would move a committee amendment that would be in the spirit of what Senator Suderline has suggested, that we ban taking contributions while we are physically in session in the building.
Mr.
during
Braun,
those days.
are you able to construct such an amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
He's good.
we would have to move, so right now, the bill inserts special before session. We'd have to move that, so we'd strike the current language, and they would say, first day of a regular session, or on days during a special session when the Senate is scheduled, or when, I guess, the General Assembly.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Surville.
So, Mr. Chairman, on that point, to what Senator Peake was just talking about, relative to this issue, Senator Peake. So I remember some of the difficulties that arose during that last special, where I remember one member who had a golf tournament, I think they had scheduled, that ended up getting preempted by a last-minute special session twice. And so one of some of the difficulties sort of I see is that suppose you schedule something, you solicit, you get money, then special session lands on top of your event after you solicited money. Does that mean you got to return it or not? Because, or how long do you have to cancel your event before you get accused of soliciting during a special and somebody's saying that you're trying to break the law, or you broke the law because you called and you know, they want to know whether you got that check before or after the thing got scheduled or whatever. Just saying that there can be some logistical issues wrapped up in the interplay of all that. So it's just something I would note.
Yeah, I just note on line 18, the current code says that no person or political committee shall make or promise to make a contribution on that day. Is what's being prohibited. Are there other members of the panel that have a question or comment? Okay. Did we take public testimony on this bill
Mr.
last?
Chair?
Yes, Senator Boysko.
Did we want to vote on that? Did we have a second on the amendment that I offered, or has that been addressed?
Well, is there a second to your concept? Okay, Brooks, how would we word that?
Mr. Chairman, so again, we'd strike the current language, and then on line 16 and also on line 20, it would say regular session or on days during a special session when the General Assembly is scheduled to meet to conduct business. Does that work?
And that would work regardless of whether one body is meeting, not the other, just whichever house is meeting, I would think would be the spirit of it as it's intended.
Mr. Chairman, that could be interpreted as if either body meets, then no one can fundraise, but yeah.
So if the House was meeting, you couldn't have a Senate event. Okay, is that clear then with the concept at least?
Mr. Chairman, could he read that one more time?
Yes, Brooks, if you could read that one more time.
Mr. Chairman, so on line 17 and then again on 20, it would read regular session or on days during a special session when the General Assembly is scheduled to meet to conduct business.
Mr. Chairman, one last time.
Senator Spruill, you want that repeated again?
Yes, sir, one last.
Yes, please, Brooks, if you could repeat that one more time.
Yes, sir.
Mr.
No.
Chairman.
Now just repeat. This is a question. I want to ask Brooks a question.
Please, go ahead.
My question is that about special section, Senator Scott talking about, okay, I'm gonna have a golf tournament on June 8th. There has not been anything said to anyone that special section is on that date. The golf set is June the 8th, and then I collect a lot of money for that June the 8th, and now all of a sudden now we got a notice we have a special section on June the 8th. So what do I do? At the time that I made it, they requested for golf tournament, there was no special section name. Nobody had no idea. I made the date and got the money. Then 2 weeks later, when they said no, a special section called on June the 8th, and I collect that money. Golf gave me all that money for my golf tournament. So what do I do?
Mr. Chairman?
Fine.
If the money was solicited or accepted prior to the special session, then this wouldn't apply and you'd be able to keep the money. If the money was solicited or accepted on one of those days or was going to be solicited or accepted on one of those days, then you'd have to cancel the event. And then ultimately, it would be up to the Commonwealth's attorney that enforces this.
So do I cancel the event? I got some money, but always some money on that day. So, but the day of the fair, so do I cancel the event?
You just postpone it because you're going to have to be in Richmond anyways. So you're not going to be there.
He done gave me, he done bought a whole team from me. I done got his money. He want to play golf.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Surville.
I mean, I think this amendment is well-intentioned, but the logistics of turning websites on and off and sending your guy down to check the P.O. box to make sure it's clear on the day we're there or the not, and making the deposit in the right place, it just seems to me a minefield, although I think the intent is good. The logistics of actually implementing it when specials can be in or out or 2 days a week or whatever, it just seems to me to be difficult. I mean, I like the idea. I don't think I can support it. It's because of the logistics.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Surville. So I think the question before the committee is whether we're going to go forward with this amendment or whether we're going to give Senator Sudeline another year to work on this by carrying it over. Senator Sudeline, we had a motion for an amendment in concept from Senator Boysko that was seconded by Senator Deeds. We've had the amendment read to us. I guess we'll vote on the amendment. All in favor of adopting that amendment will say aye. All opposed say nay. Nay. Nays, raise your hands. Can we get a count, Hopi? Okay, well, how many noes do you have there?
It's the amendment.
Is that a majority?
It's the amendment.
Oh, are you voting no on your proxies?
I got a proxy.
Okay, I don't think let's vote on the
No,
board.
I'm good with the amendment.
Let's vote on the board. This is on the amendment.
Yeah, I got one more.
Ayes 3, noes 10, 2 abstentions.
We were powerful.
Okay, we're now back to
That was a
the,
good amendment, Senator Boysko.
We're now back to the bill. Did we take testimony on this bill last week? I believe we did.
I think
Or-
the proper motion is to carry it over and see if.
Yeah, so is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to carry it over with a letter to the Joint Campaign Study Commission for them to talk about it if they feel like.
Okay, and Senator Deeds seconds that motion.
You
So
just carried over regular.
all in favor of carrying over with that letter?
You're going to make me
With the
come to
letter.
Richmond in July.
Okay, all in favor of carrying over will vote aye with a letter. Okay.
Ayes 14, no 0, 1 abstention.
Thank you, Senator Boysko.
Okay, now we've been joined by
You
Delegate
should come over to
Ransom.
Freedom Corner. We'll kick Mark Pika out. Thank
Oh, it's
you.
Delegate, I'm sorry, has she been waiting first? Yeah, you were there first. Okay, I'm sorry, Delegate, you've been waiting, and I apologize, I don't think we formally met. Why don't you come forward? Now, you have the bill dealing with the notice to the, of decedents to the Department of Elections, and we had a similar bill from Senator Kiggins, and it was my understanding that, had you two agreed to conform, or did you
Yes, we have, Mr. Chairman. That's why I'm here, to conform the bill.
Okay, so this is House Bill number 55 that we had passed previously. This would conform it to the Senator Kiggins version, so they would avoid a conference. It's been moved and seconded. So all in favor of adopting the substitute will say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and now is there a motion to report? Okay. Okay, all in favor of reporting as amended will vote aye. Janet voted last time. I think she voted. I think she.
Wait a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome, and thank you.
Wait a minute.
Okay, now, Delia Branstad is here.
Ayes 12, noes 3.
Mr. Chairman, you have a summons sitting over there.
Well, she doesn't have, I don't think there's a bill from Senator Chase. Senator Chase, I think, is here to observe or something.
Oh, no bill? Okay.
Okay, Delegate, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have House Bill 195. I'm bringing this at the request of the registrars. Basically, it adds a section to the code offering a waiver for polling places. There are strict guidelines within the code for polling places and their locations within a precinct, and the registrars obviously want to adhere to that. There are circumstances within the rural areas where, particularly during COVID, and also if we've had extreme weather events, we've had tornadoes where I live, and we've actually lost polling places. Where I live, sometimes the polling places are a school, sometimes it's a church. And what this does is it requests that if there is no suitable building appropriate within the precinct, the county or city or the local government may request a waiver for a new polling location that meets all the criteria, and they would do that through the State Board of Elections. So basically, the lines that you would want to look at are right at the bottom. It adds Section G, and it's lines 56 through 61.
And if I could ask, is there not a waiver process granted now through the Virginia Voting Rights Act? If that's what it was, we passed, was it last year or the year before, Senator McClellan?
Mr. Chairman, that's a different kind of waiver. It'd be a waiver from that act. So you could still get that waiver for this type of move. So this kind of move from one precinct to another would fall under that act. So someone could bring a lawsuit under that act that this is violates those provisions. So you might want a waiver for that, but you can't, under current law, get a waiver to move more than a mile outside of the precinct, which is what this does.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Vogel.
If I could speak to the bill, I think that fundamentally what we're trying to do is come up with an efficient way to address unusual circumstances that registrars are faced with. That's why the registrars have brought this, the goal being not to be hugely disruptive, not to be constrained, and create a geographical challenge for people who would like to be able to vote somewhere close to their original precinct, but the new precinct, for whatever reason, may not fall within the strict guidelines that currently exist. And I think having an opportunity for a waiver makes sense. I don't think it would be abused. I certainly don't think our registrars would abuse it. And I think we have found ourselves in a very unusual environment over the past several years. So yeah, whether it was a tornado or what's happened, and this is something that lots of states deal with. They have all kinds of mechanisms for handling it. But in this case, I think that we should try to work with the registrars and pass this bill. So I would make that motion.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, Senator McClellan, before we take up the motion, we'll hear from Senator McClellan.
Yeah, thank you. Just, I want to be really clear. So if this bill passes and a locality is given a waiver, they move the polling place, they would still have to go through the notice provisions, the public comment, or get a certificate of no objection from the Attorney General under the Voting Rights Act. Is that right?
Mr. Chair, Senator McClellan, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that we have Senator Spruill.
When the Senator Vogel has said that she doesn't believe that the registrars would do this and this, I would say yes for these, but you never know. You never know. And I truly believe that those who are here now are honest people, but you never know. And that's my concern. We do have in Chesapeake one precinct we're complaining about they had closed for whatever reason. They bypassed another precinct over a mile away. So why are we passing one precinct to get to another precinct? Why they couldn't find another location in our own area? So when you say they are honest folks, yes, I truly believe they're honest folks, but everybody's not honest.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Vogel.
I just wanted to speak to the legitimate concern that Senator Spruill raised, and I understand that you don't want to create any flexibility where someone might find themselves in a position to create an undue hardship or even have some nefarious intent. But I would guess that perhaps the reason that the location was inconvenient and was moved was perhaps because there was no other location that fell within the parameters that are required in code today. So I think the goal would be to allow someone to say, we'd like the precinct to remain without the ability to go to the previous location. We'd like to keep it in an area that's convenient to our voters, and we'd like to be able to at least apply for the waiver and explain why. I think that's really what we're looking for our registrars. Matt?
Mr. Chairman? Speaking to the bill, so one of the registrars actually said to comply with what's in code now, I would have to set up a tent in the middle of the field. And that wouldn't even comply with accessibility, so for handicap. But if you look on line 60, it's ensuring that we offer security. And I mean, if you want to offer an amendment to make sure that we're complying with all federal and state regulations, we could do that. But once we request that waiver, we have to comply with all voting regulations.
Okay. So we could consider an amendment. So your position is that the registrar can't, under the Voting Rights Act of Virginia, go to the Attorney General's designee who's designated and say, we need to move a polling place further. Can we get a waiver? You're saying they cannot give him the waiver today? That's what Council's shaking his head, yes.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, no. Yeah, you couldn't get a waiver to move more than a mile outside of the precinct under the current Virginia Voting Rights Act. No.
Okay, and
Brooks, Mr. Chair, could
Yes,
I ask?
Sarah Dietz.
Am I reading this right on line 59, that if the waiver is requested, the department has no choice but to grant it?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Deeds, it reads on line 59, the department shall grant such a waiver. So as it is right now, the department cannot deny the waiver.
Okay, thank you.
But it does say they may impose any conditions on the waiver deemed necessary or appropriate to ensure accessibility and security of the polling place. Okay. I believe is there further discussion from members of the committee? Are there people from the registrar's community or otherwise who'd like to speak on this bill? Please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, having served on the State Board of Elections in the past and having been an electoral board member in Albemarle County and knowing many people who fill those same jobs in particularly rural areas, it is very difficult with all, as the delegate mentioned, accessibility constraints. I mean, you have to have handicapped accessibility, you have to have security restraints, you have to have electricity, running water, et cetera. In Virginia, we don't usually set up polling places in people's barns or garages. We have places that are neutral. And it's very difficult, particularly now with the redistricting. I talked to several board members over the weekend. They're having one locality has 10 new polling places, another 4 or 5. It's becoming, it's very difficult to find places to have polling places. It's really hard, and so I would invite you to look with sympathy on the localities and accept this bill, because they're really sometimes at a loss on where to find places that fall within the constraints of the 1 mile limit and the polling jurisdiction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, James Heal with Fairfax County. We actually support this legislation. This past couple of election cycles, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there were challenges finding suitable facilities within the precinct boundaries because a lot of the traditional places that we would go to, such as churches or community centers, were not willing to open up their facilities due to the pandemic. So this would allow us to find a suitable location within kind of the area around the precinct. We would still be subject to the ordinance process and the public hearing process, and we believe under this legislation we would still be subject to the Voting Rights Act review process. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could come back to the podium, Mr. Heo, for Senator McClellan. Did you have a question for him?
Well, I guess I heard the patron say she would be willing to have an amendment to make clear that this would have to be consistent with any state or federal law, because I think here you're only trying to get a waiver of the requirement you be within a mile of the jurisdiction, but to close any ambiguity, maybe we put in line 61 after place, put consistent with applicable state and federal law, because I think there it makes clear you're only getting a waiver from Section A. You're not getting a waiver for any other requirements.
Is there a second to that? Second. Okay, so that's an amendment that's been, I assume you consider that friendly? Okay, so all in favor of the amendment will say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so now we have the bill before us. Is there any other comment before we vote? Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to report. All in favor of reporting will vote aye. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we have,
Can't you conform that?
yes, Delegate Sullivan had a bill, HB 386, which was identical to what we passed, SB 131 of Senator Frivolas about a compact with Potomac River Bridge towing. Is there a motion to pass that we passed unanimously?
I move to report if it's an identical bill. If it's not, I move to conform.
It's identical.
It's identical. I move to report then. Second.
Okay. So is there it was a unanimous vote, 15-0. Is there any discussion? Okay. Then we will vote whether or not to report HB 386.
That's 15-0.
Okay, and that, I believe, completes our docket. So thank you, members of the committee.